Okay, can I just say that I have never seen an audience sit down without being asked to. This is very, very good. Let's have a hand, yeah. Amazing, amazing. So thank you very, very much for joining us today. My name is Lord Andrew. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to this very, very special event. Here today, we're going to inaugurate the Rebecca L. Spencer Lectures on Stories of Faith. The lecture series was established to honor and express appreciation for Rebecca's 30 years of thought leadership, pastoral care, and inspiration, both here in our church. So I met Rebecca in the late 1980s, I think it was, as a fellow volunteer at the Genesis Center, where together we worked to help refugees in Southeast Asia resettle in Rhode Island, having escaped Pol Pot and other horrors in their homeland. Rebecca's been something unique and special to many of us. For me, she's been a source of passion. In my deepest sadness, a voice of grace in the wake of my failures, and a source of encouragement in my pursuit of service to our community, which oftentimes have been crazy, insane things, and Rebecca still says, go for it, which I really love about her. Rebecca's challenged us to be our best selves. She's helped us see that there is not one right path, but many righteous paths, where we learn from both our struggles and our joys, where we can explore and appreciate the beauty and complexity of the people and the world around us, where though we fail ourselves and others along the way, we can rebuild and improve with faith, humility, and kindness. Rebecca has shaped Central Congregational Church to be a place of comfort and trust, where we share and care for each other. In so doing, we expand the power and possibility of each of our spirits. Rebecca, it is such an honor for me and for all of us to celebrate you in this way. Thank you for 30 years of encouraging us to enjoy the world and change the world. Please welcome our friend Rebecca Spencer.
Singer-songwriter Patty Griffin is out with a new album. I don't know if any of you are aware of this, but she was just interviewed on PBS recently. And my friend and fellow pastor who's out in Seattle, a fellow named Tony Robinson, wrote about Patty Griffin's new album. And Tony wrote, "It's more autobiographical than her previous work. It's a turn prompted by a recent bout with cancer." She's 55. In the course of the delightful interview, Griffin made a couple of observations that rang true for Tony and for me as I read his review. While her thoughts aren't exactly unique, they are authentic. She commented that her illness had been a wake-up call, drawing her fist gently toward her forehead to indicate the bluntness of that wake-up call. She summed it up as, "You will not be getting out of here alive, by the way, so you better start living the life you want to live." Tony says that is one of the gifts of aging, the realization, as a prayer that we both are familiar with, puts it, time is made more precious by its passing, something that I think rings true for all of us. But Patty Griffin's summary was more direct and urgent than that lovely but refined line. She says, "You better start living the life you want to live." I'm not sure how we sometimes miss that point. I agree with Tony that for a stretch of life, many of us live the life or try to live the life that we think we should be living. And those expectations may come from parents or spouse or community or from society's definition of success, which places like Central always stand in juxtaposition with. We can get so focused on those shoulds that we may find it difficult to really even know what the life we want to live might be. Getting a little older often means not having quite so many responsibilities and daily obligations thrust upon you, supporting yourself and a family, raising kids, tending to aging parents, and so it pushes the question forward. What is the life you want to live? And are you living it? So a church like Central Church poses this question frequently. And this series, inspired by my friend Lauren Adrian and made possible by Lauren's gracious generosity, thank you, hopes to help all of us look more closely at that question. How do we want to live our lives in communities of all different kinds? Well, some of the answers to that are with love and laughter, certainly, with human connections, certainly, with an ever-expanding sense of community so that we can find what unites us rather than what sadly divides us, with attention giving to the mysteries that are beyond us, to what we call the transcendent, certainly, with strength to meet the sorrows that will come, certainly, but with hope that enables us to share our joys, certainly. So stay tuned for the next session that Lauren will be working on with me and others. And I really want to welcome our speaker, our first speaker, Jessi Hempel, as we at Central Church continue to work to listen and to learn from one another and from wonderful people that we invite in, to expand our sense of community and to find ways that help us serve others, realizing once again that time is made precious by its passing. So now Lauren's going to introduce Jessi.
Thank you. So it's my hope that these conversations will encourage and embolden our spirits, bring us together to serve and to lead each other in the community, give us courage to imagine and pursue possibility and expand the good ripples that we make in the space and time of our lives. You've all read Jessi's bio, so I won't repeat it. But I will say that a couple of things, that I came to know Jessi first as a kind and creative, very creative babysitter of my children, Ariane and Sam and Grace. Then as a gentle and knowing source of comfort and peace after Grace's sudden death. Then, as an extraordinary example of love and integrity in her pursuit of self. Then, as an explorer of the world of ideas. Then, as an interpreter of global innovation and change. It is such a pleasure to welcome Jessi, her wife Frances, and their son Jude to Providence, and to introduce my dear friend Jessi.
I'll go home right now while we get that on mine. That was amazing. So thanks to Lauren and to Reverend Spencer for having me. You know, when they called me to speak, I wasn't sure what I could possibly say about faith. I told Lauren, you know I don't go to church, right? I was baptized Methodist, but I haven't gone to church regularly since I was a kid. I'm completely uncertain about God, and I just want to put that up front right away. I made my professional life as a technology journalist, writing about people in Silicon Valley who, through the evolution of their companies like Facebook and Twitter and Uber, pretty much think they are God. But then in an email, Rebecca, she doesn't remember this, but she did remind me, she said, faith is inclusive and mysterious in its very essence. And then I felt like I had to come because I certainly believe that. That I know I believe. It's about bringing people in, and it's about human connection. So I sat down and I thought, okay, I'm going to write down what I believe. And then I looked at the paper for 3 hours, and nothing came out of my pen. Then I cried to my wife that I was not going to do this. This was a silly assignment, like the wrong person had been asked. And then I wrote this down, that I believe that people are all part of one perfect and consistent energy, and therefore in our differences, absolutely the same. That we suffer most in this world when we think we live apart from each other, in isolation, and on our own. And I believe that faith is learning to listen well to people, to ourselves first and foremost, and to others, and being brave enough to share our authentic selves. And this is how we connect deeply to each other and to whatever the divine is. I believe that all that is holy exists within these connections. And I guess in my professional life as a journalist and in my path on the earth, for 43 years as a human, I've learned a bit about people, especially those who appear really different from me, and how to get along with them. I've sat down to dinner with the Mormon family in Provo, Utah. I spent the afternoon with the chicken seller in South Africa trying to figure out how and why she used the internet. I learned that basically she's putting 2 dots on it just like me. Not long ago, I had to prompt Mark Zuckerberg to please change his shirt before we walked on stage together because he was sweating so bad because he was so nervous. And I've puzzled over the vocabulary words to use with my own brother as he explained his desire to carry a child as a trans man. So tonight, I'd like to share just 4 stories that illustrate what I've learned about connecting to people. 3 shorter stories and 1 longer story. First, accepting people begins with accepting ourselves. I'm the oldest one in that picture, my sister and my brother. I came out to my parents in a car on a ride home from my first year at Brown University. Everybody had seatbelts. My mother cried. She told me that she thought my cousin Charlie was gay because he was very emotional. He was 11. She bemoaned the fact that my life was going to be hard. She was sad I was going to have kids. But then she told me that she loved me. My dad was driving and he stared straight ahead and he held the wheel tight, 10-2, and he said nothing. So the next morning I was in the kitchen, I was pouring myself some cereal and he sauntered into the kitchen and he said, you know, I thought I was gay once too. And I said, oh, what did you do? And he said, oh, I married your mother. So it will surprise none of you to learn that within a couple of years my father came screaming out of the closet. Very extended rainbow face, towels, candles, years of rainbow gifts. My brother was next. By the time he finished Oberlin, he identified as transgender. And within a couple of years, my sister came home and announced she was marrying a woman. My mother is the only member of my family who identifies as straight, and sometimes I tease her that she just wants to be different. We joke in the family that there must be something in the water. You know, as adults, we're close. We text each other daily. My siblings are my first calls when anything goes wrong. But in our youth, we never really talked. My entire early family life was one in which all of us were closeted, forced to hide the part of ourselves that frightened us. I learned later that my father had tried to come out as a teenager and that a social worker at his church had encouraged him to just get married, it'll be fine, people go through that. My mother had had a violent boyfriend herself right before she met my dad, and she saw this effeminate son of a minister and thought, he's going to be great. It's important to say here that none of us remember the story of our childhood in my house the same way, and that's because we barely existed in this same childhood. We lived in the same house, but in different closets, connecting very little. Coming out for me was not a singular event. It was a years-long, uncomfortable process, really for all of us, I think. It didn't magically make us all best friends either. In fact, they are my first calls, but I get along with my siblings maybe like 65% of the time. My parents' divorce stretched out over years. They still don't talk to each other unless it's absolutely necessary. My mother was once hospitalized for depression over it. But here, and I'll speak for myself, I came to terms with who I was, and as I did that, as I was able to be honest with myself, I was able to have more compassion for my siblings and my parents, and finally to connect with them. So that is lesson number 1 that I've learned: accept people, and that begins with accepting ourselves. So lesson number 2, I think that we're here to bear witness to each other. I think that's the point. And I think that my profession has given me a unique angle on the how to do that. I became a journalist because I wanted to write, and I got to do that. But I was never the best writer. There were always people who were better than me. My gift has always been listening. I'd come back to the newsroom, and I would have learned something that nobody else would have learned, and I wouldn't even know why people had told it to me. You know, most of the time when we listen, we're listening for something with a set of biases, and I'm particularly guilty of doing this to my wife. I listen to her, but I usually think that I know what she's saying, so, you know, I usually interrupt before she's done talking to explain what she really needs. But writing long magazine pieces, and now hosting long interviews for a podcast that I host called Hello Monday, it requires a different approach to listening. I've excelled in particular at The Art of the Profile, which is a long magazine piece about a person. And when you're doing one of those, you basically drop into their life. You stay for a while, sometimes 2 or 3 weeks, and you just ask them to explain themselves. And as they're explaining themselves, you listen to the words, but you also try your best to listen to everything else. Most of the people I've written about, they've been nothing like me. Many times I can't understand where they're coming from. But my job as a journalist isn't to change their mind about their worldview, but try to understand it, to really pay attention so that I can convey it. I threw this photo of Melinda Gates up because I was in Seattle earlier this week interviewing her. And I've known her for a long time, and she's a great example of this. You know, she startled me. I actually have interviewed her a ton about her life, and she's very surprising because what most people don't necessarily know about Melinda is that she's extremely technical. She's a computer coder, that she went to school to be a computer scientist in the early 80s. That at Duke, she was one of the only women in her coding class. And then she got to Microsoft and the CEO fell in love with her, and we all forgot about that part of her life, and she became the wife of Bill Gates. And she's very private, and so she never showed us the other parts. So recently I had this interview with her where she was finally letting me know about what her view of the world was. And she told me, yeah, well, you know, when my kids were born, I just decided to stay home with them because I think that women should stay home with their kids if they could. And like the fire went out of my ears. I was like, I grew up as a feminist and believed that I want to work and that I fought for that right, and I don't understand where you're coming from. And were she my wife, I probably would have gotten into an argument with her about it. But because she was somebody that I was writing about, my job was to listen to her all the way through. And in fact, when I listened to her all the way through, her perspective on the world was actually not that different than mine. And in fact, I felt like I could connect with her even though it was a very different perspective. So this journalistic approach to listening, it served me well. A couple years ago, my brother, who is trans, became pregnant. And we decided that we would collaborate on an article about his pregnancy for Time magazine. We decided that I would interview him about the experience every couple of weeks throughout the pregnancy. And if you've ever interviewed a family member, you realize that you actually don't know these people at all. I realized as a sister, I refrained from asking him all manner of questions that would have allowed me to know him more deeply. I just figured I knew the answers, or I figured they were too private and I didn't want to go there. Questions like, did you always want to have kids? Or how do you really feel about your body? But in this new sort of paradigm where I was a journalist and I needed to write about his experience for a broad audience, I found myself asking those questions and then not interrupting and listening to his answers. And I've never felt closer than then to my brother. So that's sort of the conclusion of my idea about what it means to bear witness to each other. So then my third story is about having a sense of humor. That's my dad, the one on the right. The one on the left is his husband, Bruce. And so I think that one of the most important things as we try to connect with other human beings is that we have to invest attentions, and we have to have a sense of humor about the whole thing. It'll carry us through when other things go on. So a while ago, I came home from work to find my wife nervously chopping vegetables. Nervously. She's like, did you see Instagram? Did you see your dad's Instagram? And my father had, in fact, posted a half-dozen photos of him and his husband on the rocky coast of Oregon where they lived. In one, he was crouched like a leopard, looking back over his shoulder, wearing nothing but tivas. He had tivas on. This photo here, this is from the shoot, but this is not that photo. This is a PG version of that photo because, unlike my dad, I'm not comfortable showing naked photos of my homes to other people, whether I know them or not. Here's the conundrum. My dad didn't come out until he was 50, and if he wants to get naked and take photos, I'm in full support of him being whoever he wants to be. But social media is social media. And my wife, Frances, over there, she comes from Mississippi. Her family mostly wears clothes in their pictures. In fact, actually, mostly all of them do. And I think it's safe to assume. And my dad befriended all of her family members, which, awkward. Just don't do that. So what I did in these moments, because yes, these moments actually happen kind of a lot in my family, is that I called my sister and my brother. And we decided to triage. We're like, okay, who's going to be the one to call Dad and ask him to either take the photos down or change his privacy settings? And my sister and my brother, they couldn't see the photos because they had actually called him after a trip to Hawaii like a year earlier. You don't need to know about those photos, but let's just say these were tame compared to those. And so I turned to Frances and I said to Frances, my wife, she's sitting over there in case I'm going to tease her about this later. I said, would you mind just like screenshotting those photos and texting them to my sister and my brother so they can see just what we're talking about? And so she does that, she screenshots them, she puts them in text. Maybe this has happened to you, maybe you know where this is going, but it's like far worse than that. She starts filling in my sister's name and my brother's name, and Apple's predictive software says, oh, you're trying to email the Hempel family, and sends them to my mother. So I hung up with my siblings, I called my mom, and it was 2 seconds later, but it was too late. I call her up and she's like, Jessi, why is Frances sending me nudie photos of your dad? You will remember, my parents do not talk to each other. And Frances still, I think, is probably feeling a little sick, even hearing me relate the story, because it made her feel awful. And my mother was just not very nice about it. My father was not very nice about it. But my sister and my brother and I, it's our favorite story. We laugh about it all the time. Because we're all trying to do the best we can. And when it's that absurd, you have to laugh. So I have one more story for you. Once we get past the sense of humor. This is probably my longer story. But this is about how I think that ultimately people become our redemption. So a year ago this month, Frances was newly pregnant, and we went to the doctor for an ultrasound. And she did the ultrasound, and she looks up a little like, how do I say this? And she's like, how do you feel about twins? This is how we felt about twins. This is the photo that we snapped on the sidewalk that day as we walked out, and truly we had no idea what was ahead of us. Within a month, we'd sold our one-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side, and we were prepared to start a life as members of Multiples Club. Then, when Frances was 20 weeks along, we learned that one of our sons had a problem with his umbilical cord, and he was too tiny. For the next 8.5 weeks, we waited and watched and prayed. And each week, by the way, since I said the thing earlier about God and not being sure about God, we just hit every God. Like, if anybody could put out a God, we praised it that God. And each week, several times a week, we would walk from our house on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, through Central Park, to our doctor's office. And we would be waiting to find out if when she did the scan, she would hear 1 heartbeat or 2 heartbeats. Meanwhile, the babies grew, and we named them Aster Reed and Jude Rowley. And as the weeks passed, they began to kick. Jude had sort of a hard kick down on the left side, and Aster would flutter up here on the right. And we'd tell him, we'd say, you know, stay, Aster. Every night before we go to bed, we'd say, we want you here, you gotta stay, you gotta work for this. Know that you're working. And at first the impossible happened. Aster didn't die. He reached the minimum viable weight for delivery, 1.2 pounds, which is so tiny. He passed the 24-week mark, and if he were a single child, the doctors told us they would have delivered him right then. But as his parents, we faced this really awful ethical decision. We had 2 children in the same room, and every day that we let them both stay in was a day that threatened Aster more, but that gave Jude more of a chance. The choice, the doctors told us, was ours. No one can make that choice for us. So when the boys were 28 weeks along, our doctor said it was time to consider delivery. We toured the NICU. Frances took the steroid shots to help the baby's lungs develop. We met with the lactation consultant, and we began to prepare for the extended stay at the hospital that would come with both babies. That night our doctor called us and he said, it was 11 o'clock, and he said, I know this is a hard decision. Just know that whatever decision that you make today, you're not ever going to be comfortable with it, no matter which way things go. We decided to try to hold out to get to 29 weeks, maybe 30, but definitely 29. We just thought, well, if we've made it this far, like, if we can just wait. I just remember this pile of medical journals, because we were at the point where that was the only tool that we really had to make an informed decision. And 2 days before we hit 29 weeks, we went for our scan and there was only 1 heartbeat. So we left the hospital and we walked through Central Park all the way home. And Frances carried our sons for 7 more weeks, one growing and flipping and pushing against her ribs. and one quietly resting and waiting. And my memory of those weeks is a blur. I don't remember the events, I remember the people. Francis's mom and stepdad flew up from Mississippi to unpack boxes in the home we'd hardly found, because remember back then when we thought we had twins, we sold our apartment? Colleagues sent flowers, and then food, and then more flowers. People we didn't know well dropped meals over. People I'd written about once sent soup in the mail. Someone introduced us to a bereavement doula named Jay, who specializes in helping families who don't bring their babies home from the hospital. Jay was magic in many ways, but her greatest gift was her extreme comfort with silence and with other people's discomfort. In the end, the babies came early. Frances went into labor on the first Wednesday in October. I wish you could have seen her. She was so amazing. I called all of our families. It was a Wednesday, and you know, like if you've ever had a first baby, like a lot of times you get to the hospital way, way, way too early. So even as we were like getting in the taxi and going, I remember calling work and being like, I'm gonna be late. Because in my mind, I was like, they're gonna send us home, that's how this stuff works. And we get in there and the doctor's like, oh no, you're having these babies, they're coming today. And as I tried to compete with that men, I called up all of our families, and they had to fly from Mississippi and from Oregon, and everybody got there before the babies came out. Don't ask me how that happened. Once she started pushing, she pushed both babies out in 20 minutes. It's impossible to put words to the discordance that goes with experiencing the happiest and the saddest moment of your life in a 5-minute period. Jude arrived feisty and hungry and alert, and Astor was tiny and perfectly formed. Both boys had the same elongated feet, his bulbous little heels. And we brought both boys up to the recovery room where our families gathered around us to help us say goodbye to Astor. 2 days later, we put tiny Jude in the car and called an Uber to go home, car seat, called an Uber to go home. Anyone who's ever had a baby also knows how insane it seems on that first day when they just give this tiny human to you and say, you'll be fine. When we met the social worker at the hospital, I had asked for the playbook on grief. I was like, okay, we're gonna do this. We've got a great relationship. We've got lots of friends. Just give me the 1-2 tackle. Like, is it support group, therapy, and then you're done? Like, and she's like, no, that's not how it works. You don't get better. The grief will get better. You will be different. What will happen is that the grief you experience will always remain exactly the same size. But over time, other experiences will crowd up around you, and your life will become fuller and fuller. Jude is 5 months old, and that feels true. I am still grieving. I still turn corners when I see twin strollers coming down. For whatever reason, that's the thing. Like when I see twin strollers at the end of a sidewalk, stomach turns. And Frances, because she has a sense of humor, will lean over and be like, they're not twins, they're probably just cousins. I have yet to arrive at what exactly to say when people ask me how many kids I have. Because to answer the question, one feels too untruthful. But to really answer the question feels absolutely alarming for strangers. But the days are filling up. Visits home to Mississippi and holidays and dinners with friends and bottles of wine. With Frances, who has this way of making everything hard feel easier, and who isn't afraid to clip our tiny son's toenails, which to me is so scary. It can function on no sleep, it turns out. And with Jude, who is the most amazing miracle. He sleeps through the night now and he can roll over. And every morning when I walk into his bedroom, he looks at me like I'm some long-lost friend come to make mischief again. You know, Jude is still less than 6 months, which means that he still doesn't understand that he is actually a separate human being than me. He thinks that my toes wiggling are the same as his toes wiggling, and we're just one big pile of human, that's all of us. And that sense of independence doesn't even begin to kick in until about 6 months. I wish this thing that he believes now could stay with him forever, because that is really what I think is true. We're all one big spectacular mass of humanity, working our way closer to each other with every breath. That is my story. Thank you.
Jessi's agreed to take questions and have some conversation. So, yeah.
The more awkward, the better.
Yeah.
Any questions about your parents and Instagram? I can go through. Yeah.
How close in age are you to your siblings? How many years apart?
So I am the oldest. I'm 3.5 years older than my sister and 5.5 years older than my brother. My brother had a child, and he is. You probably heard him earlier because he is wandering around here. My brother's back there. His kid Felix is the one with the really sweet bow tie. And if you want to read the story in time, if you want to know more about his path to parenthood, it's amazing. Not because he's my brother, although frankly it is amazing because of that, but because it's a really brave story about something that is happening more and more today, which is more and more transgender people are wanting to have the opportunity to become parents. And so that really is what the story is about, and you can find it basically by Googling my name and the word transgender. So it's super easy to find. Yeah, Lauren.
How do you use your work to try to share what you feel about humanity?
Writing this remarks today actually helped me clarify that a little bit. You would think that my work as a writer, writing things like an article about my brother for Time magazine, would be really different than my work as a technology journalist, writing things about how Facebook evolved. But I actually think that they're pretty similar. The reason why I came to technology journalism, I came at the time when social networks were just sprouting up. I met Mark Zuckerberg very early, and I have written about tech always for years from the perspective of what is this doing for people's relationships? Is it bringing us closer together or farther apart? And I think to answer your question, even though we are in a dark moment right now with technology, I still am fundamentally an optimist. I believe that people got into this to make things that would bring each other closer together. That's kind of the only reason any of us make things in the first place. And we are at the dark before the dawn on that. But ultimately, that is what this technology is about. And I think that if you read my professional body of work or you listen to the podcast, it is a lot asking people to step up and take accountability on that front, and asking people how they think about that. That makes sense. Yeah.
With all of these multiple and shadow over your lifetime, the comment was made that you're not a church-going person. At this point, are you more inclined to think about traditional religion in some form?
I love that question, and I love that question in part because you happen to have caught me right at the moment where we are thinking a lot about traditional religion. I grew up in the church. My father was the son of a minister. My father had a very bad experience with the church when he tried to come out, and that was the point at which my family broke with the church. I have always missed the community that it gave me, and also the time that it gave me to sit quietly with myself and take stock and inventory. And so as we think about our son, who's just arrived in the world, we think a lot about how and whether to do that. I was baptized Methodist. My wife was baptized Methodist. As some of you may have known, the Methodist Church is going through a very difficult time this spring. And so we have been considering whether and how to join it or be a part of it. And I'll be honest, we're very confused about it. And it has manifested so far in my wife going and me not, mostly because I say I'm going to go and I'm too lazy on Sunday morning.
The UCC doesn't agree with that.
Hey, I have to tell you, my wife is from Tupelo, Mississippi, small town Mississippi. Everybody in her family still lives there. They're very involved in the Methodist Church there. We now own a house there. We spend a ton of time in Tupelo. And I think one of the biggest surprises for me is that people are pretty great. And sometimes that gets clouded by all of the titles that we slap onto our church communities, our actual communities, and we're actually bringing our child down to be blessed in Tupelo in May. Minister.
How has the advent of the child affected your life?
We don't sleep anymore.
Yeah.
Haven't had a haircut in a long time. So I waited very long to have kids. I thought I was never going to have kids. I had no interest in kids. I think a lot of that was shaped by having a very challenging childhood with my own parents. We had been together for 7 or 8 years, and we're almost at the point where we were like, okay, I guess we missed this boat. And then, this is just my experience, but he came along, and every single thing was different. It was like the world was suddenly Technicolor. And it has been a wonderful forcing agent to remind me that I need to be hungry for the world to be better. And it could be I'm 43, and it can be very easy at this point. Like, my career has developed enough, I've made enough money that we can live fine, and I can live a very complacent life, and suddenly Jude comes along, and the question that I have to go back to myself is, okay, what can I be doing better and more? Like, what does it mean to be making the world a place where he can grow up? So, I don't think that's original. Anyone here who's ever had a kid had probably thought that. Yeah.
I just wondered how you and your wife share the child-rearing duties.
Oh, how do we share the childhood duties? Well, the way, I'm a little bit embarrassed about this because I feel like it's not, I love to tell you a better story about myself when my wife is right there. But when we were making the decision to have a kid, we decided that one of the two of us, just practically, was going to have to be the one who stepped toward making sure the bills were paid, and the other was going to be the one who stepped toward making sure that someone was at the kids' doctor's appointments with them. And just the way that our life works, it was very obvious that I was going to go toward my career. So I actually switched jobs. I went from a media company to a technology company. I'm now working at LinkedIn doing media, and we try to split care equally when we're home. We're good partners about it, but there's no such thing as equal. And also, Francis carried the baby, and I don't know if it's PC or not to say, but I think that it is right now our son has a very different attachment to Francis. I assume that will change as we grow up, but I am so grateful that he has that attachment to her. I think it will make him a strong and confident kid. So, does that kind of get the question?
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you share what made Mark Zuckerberg sweat?
Oh my gosh. There are things I wish made him sweat that don't. Like, I don't know the government. So he is terrified of public speaking. And he has gotten a lot better at it. And he has had a series of coaches, starting in like 2006. But he is kind of still terrible at it. And so the way that he deals with this is he never wants to do an interview setting where it's like a Q&A. He always wants to be the speaker. He gets real clear about what he's saying beforehand. He gets a mic and he just talks. And so a couple of years ago, he started to, his job changed a little bit. This was like 4 years ago. His job changed a little bit so that he was being called upon to do more Q&As, and they made him really, really, really nervous. And so when he was called upon to do that, the way that kind of worked was there were 2 or 3 people who could interview him publicly. And so I was one of those people, so for several years I traveled with him a bunch, I did a bunch of things with him. And, this was a guy, I don't know the name for it, but he doesn't have the reflex that makes him want to make small talk with you important. I've known the guy for 16 years, and if we have 5 minutes before we're going to go on stage and we're standing next to each other, it no longer makes me uncomfortable. He is just going to stand there and not compete. There are business executives like Melinda Gates, who has somebody who stands next to her and reminds her that when we saw each other 2 months ago in New York City on a Tuesday at 4, I had just had a baby. So that when she walks in, she can say, "Oh, Mary, how's your baby?" Right? That's not Mark. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about your baby. He's not interested in making niceties. He's not actually interested, from my perspective, So he sweats the most when he has to actually figure out how to interact with people. So, yeah.
I wonder, have you thought about how you both will talk with Jude about each other after? So that Carrie's asked her with him as a buddy through life?
I love that you asked that. And for us, I think it's different for everybody, but it means so much for us when people use Astor's name and talk about him because he's so present for us. When we think about it, our biggest priority is to make sure that we, together as a family, have cycled through our own grief by the time Jude has language, so that his memory of his birth is super happy, that he knows that it was like the happiest day of our life and it's not clouded by this other sad thing. No, we don't know yet. We know that we're always going to talk about it too, and we wonder how it will affect him. It may not ever affect him in ways that we can name or notice, but he did spend 9 months hanging out next to this guy who's not here, and that's a loss that he had before he had language. So think about it. So, and we're also looking for other people who've had that experience. We have not yet, but it's funny and maybe a beautiful thing that none of our close community has come forward and said, oh, I had an experience like that.
Jessi, you touched on it earlier. You were talking about technology and community. I wonder if you could give us a little more on that theme and what you've learned about that and how you think about traditional forms of community like the church. And what does it all say about the opportunities for us all to be more caring for each other and tolerant and appreciative of each other?
So that's not a question, that's a conversation. And the right one to be having. I mean, so let's take Facebook for a second. Facebook has promised us community, right? But Facebook is an algorithm spitting out things that want our attention. That's what Facebook is. And to my mind, for all the good that it has done, and it has done good. I mean, I just told you that we don't have any close people in our community who have had a stillbirth and a twin stillbirth, but we found a close group of people on Facebook for whom this happened, that we never would have found, right? Now that's the upside. The downside is that Facebook is like, whoa, you want to see these people all the time in your feed, and you know what, we don't. We want to see them once in a while. But it's the impact on local community structures that is the most troubling. Recently there was a study, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal that said that Facebook wanted to draw more local news from local communities into its feed because it thought that people needed to connect more locally. But there was none left. There weren't enough local papers operating in local communities. And I think that a lot of the divisive stuff that we are feeling as a culture right now comes down to not sort of broad strokes, things that need changing, and not even like, we can blame for this, but that is not necessarily useful. I mean, there's a piece of that is useful. I would like to see tech companies regulated better. I would like to see us sort of put a cultural balance on the check of the sort of attention that we give to those Silicon Valley young people who make a lot of money. But a lot of this is work that we need to do in our own local communities, restoring the connections between each other so that we turn to people when things are hard, and so that we have a community of people to turn to when things are hard. And I do think that the last decade of social networking has stripped us of the need of that. Because you can a lot of the things that Francis's parents turned to her church community for example, I can kind of turn to the internet for now. And so you can stitch together the trappings of some of the stuff that you get from communities, whether it is like ordering food in, or getting somebody to watch your kid, or getting somebody to drive your grandmother to her doctor's appointment. But you can't stitch together the human connection that comes from knowing and trusting the people with whom you've been doing that for decades. And that, to me, is what I want most for a church community when I think about wanting a community for Jude to grow up in. Yeah?
Saying that reminded me of something like that Lauren called the sisterly took first, forget the last acquisition.
She has a whole bunch of things she's doing. They're
Yeah.
really cool. This is Steve Jobs' widow has basically taken her wealth and thrown it at both restoring media in all of its essence and restoring community. There are a lot of people working at that. The biggest challenge that I see is that people don't know how to talk to each other across industries and across backgrounds. So you get a bunch of people in Silicon Valley and they're like, and Lorena's of this group of people, they're like, okay, we can make this problem better. We're gonna throw the resources we know how to throw to the problem as we've defined it, because we understand the problem, like do it our way. And then you have people in different industries thinking about it differently, but there's no cross-collaboration or cross-communication. And what I find is that we understand our problems narrowly, and I am a specialist in the ethos of Silicon Valley, right? Silicon Valley, there's an engineering mindset, which is, an engineering mindset is a wonderful way to approach a problem. It is thorough and direct, and my experience in Silicon Valley has been that the problem can always be defined and solved through tech with enough money. But I think that when you start to get at I think the thing that we're missing to actually begin to address some of these problems is cross-collaboration. The people in Silicon Valley not thinking as Mark does, I am the guy, I am the smartest, and therefore I'm going to tell you what to do, but instead working across boundaries with people in other industries and people in governments and people in the communities that they serve. Maybe I strayed from your question. So sorry. Yeah.
Have you been able to get into the mind of Elon Musk at all?
Take enough drugs. Stop thinking at all. And you are in Elon Musk's mind. Yeah, I will tell you, I don't understand why. I've spent a little bit of time with him and also with his brother Kimball, who does a bunch of urban farming things. And I don't get the appeal. He's got a lot of wild ideas. He has made good on a number of those ideas, but mostly I see him as a man who does a lot of harm. And I think one thing that makes me angry as a woman trying to work in Silicon Valley is I see us celebrate that way of being in the world. So we take somebody like that who just seems a little off his rocker, has a great idea for electric cars and a great idea to send rockets to space, and we need those great ideas, mind you. But the thing is that Elon Musk could mess up just a ton from here on out, and we would still write books about him, and we still read those books. And I think the bar for women is so much lower. There is no bar for women. As a woman trying to work in Silicon Valley, if you have a big idea, you make one mistake and you're out of the game and you can never raise money again. So I actually feel mostly angry at Elon Musk. And I'll give you an example. So has anybody followed Elizabeth Holmes? Maybe you saw the documentary, or maybe you saw the movie, or maybe you read the book, or maybe you heard the podcast. Elizabeth Holmes has what I call perfect product market fit for a villain. And she did an atrocious thing. As a young woman entrepreneur at Stanford, she lied up the wazoo and wasted tons of money. And she started a company called Theranos. And Theranos was going to manufacture a blood test that anybody who really understood science knew was impossible. But she got sort of thrown into the mechanism of the Silicon Valley startup. And she came out the other end having embellished all of her truths until she couldn't recognize them and having basically squandered billions of dollars. And I'll tell you, she's living right now in a studio apartment in San Francisco thinking daily about suicide. She is a mess. And she did a bad thing, and she will probably go to jail. But I wonder why we need so many stories in our culture about that bad thing that she did when I see other men in Silicon Valley starting companies, often ripping people off, like Parker Conrad, who started Zenefits at the same time. So there's a guy who started a company, cheated a bunch of people at the same time as Elizabeth. And I'm gonna guess that most of you in the tech industry don't know his name. And he already has managed to raise another $300 million for a new company.
He should run for mayor of Providence.
That's say anything on that one? Yeah.
What do you think about the trend of some people really wanting to break up the huge technology?
I think they should do it. And the problem from my perspective is, the problem is that we don't know how to do it. There's a couple of problems. One is that the regulators in DC, first of all, let it go too long during the Obama administration while we were all so in love with the Silicon Valley firehouses because they were like the optimists in our economy. That was the point at which we should have been figuring out how to regulate them. And we didn't do it, and now they are bigger than the government. And so it's really hard to figure out like how to get in and effectively break them up. A second problem is the government, for the most part, doesn't understand enough about how they work to participate intelligently in conversations about how to do it. There are some aspects of like the FCC, for example, is a great position to be able to regulate around the edges. This is not like sort of one big fix. This is like 20 micro fixes, right? But the biggest reason that I hear about why people don't want to take action, it's kind of an excuse, but it is that China also has these companies that are growing just as fast and that are very competitive with the American companies. And if we regulate the frightful five, as they call Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google, we risk slowing them down right at the point where China is going to like zoom up ahead of us. And I think that's a real fear, but I have to believe that that fear shouldn't slow us down from doing the right thing for the people who live in this country right now, and specifically to put us in a direction that our children are going to be okay. But I can't speak knowledgeably really to the rise of China and what that actually means. So.
China actually has companies as large as Google.
Larger. So Baidu, Alibaba, so WeChat, Weixin, in Chinese is basically, has anybody here used WhatsApp before? It belongs to Facebook. So WhatsApp is sort of the American version of WeChat. And in China, the internet works basically, it's not like one big internet where you can go into sort of a free-for-all. Most people just go into their version of WhatsApp, WeChat, and do all of their searching and all of their buying inside that one narrow app. Which, think about the control that the company who runs that app has over the Chinese public. So, yeah.
How do you feel for the first 5 years of your son's life about the merit between real books and e-books or e-devices for pre-K?
So, I'm going to try to speak for both of us.
You can try.
So the question is, how do I feel for the first 5 years about ebooks versus real books? Or essentially, I think that's in part a screen time question. I know screen time. I'm like, we do no screen time. I say that, but here's the thing, like in the middle of the night when I've been up a really long time and the baby like won't sleep unless we're holding him just like this, I'm on my phone. So I have to say this to you guys with a straight face, but also just say like I'm trying to do the best I can. But I feel pretty strongly that I don't like what screens do to him. Like I remember he was like 3 months old. We'd walk by a television while it was on and he'd go, oh, right? And that I want to give him the opportunity mostly, like screens or no screens, the opportunity to live inside his own head, to think his own thoughts, and to be able to be alone with himself. And I worry that introducing too much technology too early will not lay a foundation for that. And also, for what it's worth, all those tech folks in Silicon Valley, they're sending their kids to like Waldorf schools. They're like trying to de-screen them as much as possible. So, yeah.
Those of us who grew up in faith communities, we kind of had the spirituality piece that became the structure, the beliefs that we now use to interact with others in our communities. How do you see your son growing up in the absence of that? What's the connector for him that's going to be that's larger than just himself or whatever the world is like at the time he's my age?
I ask myself that all the time. I don't have it. I mean, that's part of why we're searching for a church now. We're very lucky that Francis comes from a very large, very intact family. When we go to Tupelo, which is often, he has like 9 cousins who just sort of like pal around together. It's like a massive family, and that, to some degree, will be where we find that. But that family is very connected to a church, and so it would be, it's like we're getting secondhand church. Like, as long as we're part of that family, we're also part of their spiritual community. Apart from that, I don't have a good answer for that. I know that I feel nervous about getting too close to an institution at this moment as I look out at institutions like the Methodist Church, making what I consider to be very problematic choices. And then I look at the Catholic Church and how sort of thrown up into the spotlight the Catholic Church has been. And I can't reconcile that with like the community and communion I get from being with a small group of people who have all decided to throw in together in life and try to make it work together because they're stronger together than apart.
Can I just say one thing? I think one of the reasons I am appreciative of Jessi's perspective is I am an opt-inner, right? So like, grew up in the Methodist Church, is having this problem, I'm going to church. And so I think this is a conversation we have often and fall on different sides of the coin, sort of all the time as a family as we try to sort of navigate where that line is. And the importance of being in community and also making sure it's a community that shares your values and how much you opt in when the statements aren't ones you agree with, but the community is really important. And so I think it's, probably a conversation we have daily about how we do that, particularly with Jude. Sorry. How is the Methodist Church dealing with this? So I have read it in the news and I know it seems like such an extreme, unexpected stance actually.
I don't know, I can only give you 2 anecdotal points, and they're both from Francis, but the week that went down, Francis trotted off to the Methodist Church in Park Slope, Brooklyn, which I'm not sure if you've been to Park Slope, Brooklyn, but it's basically just one big rainbow flag down the road to the church, right? And there was a rainbow flag over the altar, and they were treating it like a day of mourning. And so there's that. And then I know at your church at home, didn't your pastor call your mother about it?
Yes, I think it's a large political question having a lot to do with the relationship of the Methodist Church in the U.S. and the international church, and how sort of the politics color that, and what it means to be part of an international church and community when nations handle a number of things differently, and how you walk that line.
So somebody gets the last question. Who's the bravest one in the group? Come on. Go ahead. Thanks.
I'm deeply moved by your story and your testimonial about the statement. What would you say, having gone through this for both of you, is the gift that Esther brought to both of you?
I think he made us understand that our family is a miracle. I think before that, we had a kid. We thought, we'll try to have a kid. And that was going to work. And we were 2 adults going through life and we were having a kid. But we fought so hard for him. And when we didn't get to bring him home, but we did bring Jude home, we could see Jude totally differently. Poor Jude, because he's got these 2 moms who are basically always breathing down his neck. We're always like, is he breathing? Is he breathing? Going to college, and we're going to be like, is he driving? And that is Asper's gift.